Google recorded 24,000 interactions with me in a single month. That's roughly 800 moments a day. Not searches, moments. Every video I watched, every route I checked, every app download, every document edit, every website touched by Google's invisible infrastructure. And here's the disturbing part. I'm someone who actively tries to avoid this. I changed privacy settings. I disabled tracking. I don't even use Gmail as my primary email. Didn't matter. Because this isn't a bug. This is the business model working perfectly. And once you see how deep this system actually goes, you stop thinking of Google as a search engine. You start realizing Google quietly became the operating system for modern life. Hi everyone. Today I want to show you something most people never fully understand. How Google watches you. Why it's almost impossible to avoid. The two hidden backdoors most people have never heard of. And why AI is about to make this exponentially more invasive. Because this story is much bigger than targeted ads. This is about the construction of the most sophisticated behavioral surveillance system ever built by a private company. And most of us volunteered for it. Let me show you what Google really is. Most people think Google is a search engine, a browser, a map app, an email provider. That's the illusion. Google is actually an advertising company. Everything else is bait. Search, Chrome, YouTube, Gmail, Maps, Android, Docs. They're not the product. You are the product being measured. Because over 70% of Google's revenue comes from advertising, which means Google's business depends on understanding human behavior at massive scale. Not vaguely, precisely. The better Google understands what scares you, what excites you, what keeps your attention, where you go, who you love, what you buy, what you believe, the more valuable you become to advertisers. That's the real engine underneath the internet. And once you understand that, Google's behavior suddenly makes perfect sense. Imagine your digital life as a series of fishbowls. Every Google product gets its own bowl. Search, Maps, YouTube, Chrome, Gmail. Each one fills slowly with data about you. Search learns your curiosity. Maps learns your movement. YouTube learns your psychology. Chrome learns almost everything else. Individually, each bowl is unsettling. Combined, they become something else entirely. A behavioral clone. A system capable of predicting what you'll click, what you'll buy, what emotional state you're in, and increasingly, what you're likely to do next. That's the future Google is building, and AI is about to supercharge it. But before we get there, you need to understand how deeply Google already embedded itself into your life. Because most people think, I can just stop using Google. No, you probably can't. Because Google isn't just a website anymore. Google became the infrastructure layer of the internet itself. Over half the internet runs Google Analytics, meaning millions of websites report visitor behavior back to Google. Even websites that aren't Google. Then there's reCAPTCHA, those little, I'm not a robot checkboxes. That's Google too. Meaning Google can observe your activity across websites you never realized had any connection to Google at all. That's the genius of the system. Google no longer needs you to be on google.com to collect data. The internet itself became the sensor network. Now let's talk about Chrome, because Chrome might be one of the most effective surveillance tools ever normalized. Nearly 2/3 of internet users browse through Chrome. And even when you're signed out, Chrome still sends data back to Google, including what you type into the address bar, sometimes before you even hit enter. Think about how intimate that is. Half-formed thoughts, private searches, typos, intentions, captured before they fully become actions. And the moment you log into Gmail or YouTube, Chrome quietly signs you in too. Seamlessly, conveniently. That word matters, convenient. Because the modern internet trades convenience for visibility. And most people never realize how expensive that trade actually became. But YouTube might be the most psychologically powerful part of Google's empire. Because YouTube doesn't just track what you watch. It tracks how long you watch, where you pause, what you replay, what thumbnails attract you, what emotional topics hold your attention. That data becomes identity modeling. Google groups people into behavioral categories so specific they become almost eerie. Not men aged 30 to 40. More like new fathers anxious about money who watch baseball highlights at night and are likely to buy a truck within 6 months. That precision is worth billions. And Google insists, we don't sell your data. Technically true, but also deeply misleading. Because Google doesn't sell your file. It sells access to you. That distinction matters. Google's value comes from knowing more about you than anyone else. The less competitors know, and the more Google knows, the more powerful Google becomes. Now, if this story ended at ads, it would already be disturbing. But it gets darker, because Google has two hidden back doors most people never think about. The first is government access. And this is where things stop feeling theoretical. Most people assume government surveillance requires warrants, judges, dramatic courtroom scenes. Sometimes it doesn't. Programs like Section 702 allow communications involving foreigners to be collected, meaning if you communicate internationally at all, your data can be swept into surveillance systems incidentally. Then there are national security letters. The FBI can compel companies to hand over metadata without a traditional warrant process. Who you talk to, when, how often, and most people never even know it happened. Now combine that with Gmail. Your inbox isn't just messages anymore. It's receipts, travel plans, banking alerts, relationships, identity verification, your entire logistical life. One account, one searchable behavioral archive. But the second backdoor is even bigger. Advertising. Because Google's ad system broadcasts astonishing amounts of behavioral information into something called the bid stream. Every time an ad loads, advertisers bid for your attention in milliseconds. And those bid requests can contain device data, behavioral signals, and sometimes location information, hundreds of times per day. That data spreads outward into a hidden ecosystem of brokers and surveillance companies. That's how your data escapes. Not necessarily because Google directly sold it, but because the advertising system itself became a massive data leakage machine. And this is where the story changes again. Because AI is about to connect everything. Search history, emails, documents, calendar, maps, photos, YouTube behavior. Google calls this personal intelligence. Sounds helpful, sounds futuristic, but think carefully about what it actually means. An AI system trained on your thoughts, your routines, your relationships, your conversations, your preferences, your fears, your behavior patterns. A machine learning model built from the texture of your life itself. And Google is incentivized to make this feel useful enough that you willingly feed it more. That's the brilliance of the strategy. The surveillance becomes convenient, even addictive, and eventually normal. This is the part people misunderstand about modern surveillance. Nobody forced us. Most of the time, we clicked accept because the services were incredible. And honestly, they still are. Google built some of the most useful tools in human history. That's what makes this so complicated. The trade was never privacy for nothing. The trade was privacy for convenience, speed, personalization, and free services. And billions of people accepted it, gradually, quietly, one click at a time, until surveillance became infrastructure. Now, can you completely escape Google? Probably not. Not realistically. But that doesn't mean resistance is pointless. Because privacy is not about disappearing completely. It's about reducing unnecessary exposure, using different search engines sometimes, turning off location history, staying signed out when possible, limiting app permissions, thinking critically before connecting AI systems to your personal life. Small friction, intentional boundaries. That matters. Because the cleaner your digital footprint is, the less complete the behavioral profile becomes. And maybe the biggest question isn't, is Google spying on us? At this point, that answer is obvious. The real question is, how much surveillance are we willing to normalize in exchange for convenience? Because Google didn't just build products. Google built the internet most of us now depend on and wired it to watch us.